The tentative agreement reached in Geneva was just that, tentative, leaving a lot of work to be done before the United States and China can reach a long-term solution to their trade conflicts. Elizabeth Economy is a China expert at the Hoover Institution who keeps careful track of the relative strengths and weaknesses of the world's two largest economies.
I think both countries have economic vulnerabilities. I think the assessment on the part of the Trump administration was that China was more vulnerable because it exports much more to the United States than the U.S. does to China. Its economy has also been struggling. It's been in a prolonged economic slowdown for at least 3 years now. But I think there was a fundamental miscalculation on the part of the administration. They didn't appreciate that we have a much greater sort of sole or near sole source reliance on a number of critical products from China. Critical minerals, rare earth elements, active pharmaceutical ingredients. These are all things that are essential for our economic security, our national security, our human security, and will devastate, quite frankly, our pharmaceutical industries and our defense and technology industries. So there's a balance, I think, between the Chinese vulnerabilities and the U.S. vulnerabilities. Both of us, I think, have serious vulnerabilities in the space of this tariff war.
Does the rest of the world give one side, between the United States and China, an advantage over the other? I mean, both sides historically have tried to recruit the rest of the world.
I think for the advanced market democracies, what we've seen has been, in some respects, somewhat surprising. I think there was a belief on the part of the Chinese government that given this tariff war, this global tariff war that President Trump has launched, that it would be easy pickings, that China would walk in and basically say, we are a stabilizing force in the global economy, we're a stabilizing force in the international system, and they've gone around saying, let's join hands and work together to push back against President Trump and this tariff war. I think what they found is that really nobody's that interested in buying what they're selling. There's an entire world now emerging that is set to support the current rules-based order that doesn't include the United States, but also doesn't include China.
One destination of Chinese goods that otherwise might be exported would be domestically. Increased domestic consumption, which has been talked about for years now. What are the prospects? In fact, Xi Jinping might say, okay, we're going to stimulate the consumer.
I mean, Chinese economists have been saying for years now that the government needs to do more to support the consumer economy. And part of that would be, investing more in the healthcare system, the education system, the pension system, giving the Chinese people a sense that they don't need to continue to save in the case of an emergency. But Xi Jinping is allergic to what he calls social welfareism. He doesn't want to give the Chinese people any incentive not to work. At least that's how he looks at it. So again, we've seen President Xi over the course of this tariff war take a few steps, in the form of raising wages for civil servants, understanding the fact that a year ago or a year and a half ago, he actually cut the same wages. So I don't know whether this is actually increase or it's just taking them back to where they were. And also, again, having this massive goods trade-in program. But mostly what he's done, I think, is encourage banks to loan to small and medium-sized enterprises. You've seen Alibaba, for example, reduce the cost of companies putting their goods on its platform to encourage small and medium-sized enterprises to be able to export. So there are steps that are being taken, but there's nothing in the way of sort of a massive boost to the consumer economy that I think China's economy would like to see.
Coming next, the story of NASDAQ in Europe and how Sweden's deep and robust capital markets connection to tech startups could give the rest of Europe an example to follow.
Men jeg gikk jo akkurat en til arbeider. Altså, den tok imot akkurat på en til arbeider her. Den fra 15. mai 1925.
Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We got to talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big things.
A new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake passion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
The incidence of cancer, which is to say people getting it, is higher than it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. Is that because detection is better than it used to be?
All right, so the dirty secret is we have no idea. We don't collect data well in the United States. What we do know is that there's not a dramatic rise in cancer in the United States, but what we are seeing is a troubling trend is younger people are getting more cancers. That's real. We have no idea why, but we are seeing younger people, more colon cancer, more breast cancer, and other cancers in younger individuals, 20, 30, 40-year-olds, that we never used to see.
What do you think could possibly be the cause? It assumes pollution or the environment in some ways?
We assume it's either something in the environment, we assume it's diet, it's ultra-processed foods, it's microplastics, it's changes in the microbiome. We really don't know.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Onen, only on Bloomberg.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics, and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets. Bloomberg conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this new normal?
Are markets too optimistic?
How do you worry about the things that are outside your control?
How does the current fighting completely stop?
I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
This is a story about attracting bees with honey.
Skulle du lage den så, ja?
Of rich capital markets attracting the bees of tech entrepreneurs.
Nej,
Something that has helped drive U.S. economic growth, but that has largely been lacking in Europe, except in one particular corner.
About 39% of household assets in the United States are invested in equities, which is the highest in the world. But here in Sweden, it's 36%.
And it's not just how much, it's how broad.
About 90% of the Swedes' savings are in some financial assets, which makes us the most investing country, at least in Europe.
We're blessed to have a broad equity participation, so lots of people who own stocks directly. What that does is, of course, it creates this economic alignment, etc.
We've come to expect robust capital markets supported by retail investment in the United States, but not necessarily in Sweden, a Nordic country with a population of just a little more than 10 million people that punches above its weight in the depth of its capital markets and is home to NASDAQ's European headquarters.
We operate our markets here and also in the Nordics. We own and operate almost all the markets in the Nordics.
We spoke to NASDAQ CEO Adena Friedman in New York in April, not long after President Trump had roiled the markets with his sweeping tariff announcements.
So on options in 2024, we had an average of about 24 million contracts traded a day. On Friday, we had 94 million contracts traded. Now, what generates that, though, what's really, really interesting is options markets are extremely data heavy.
Friedman and her NASDAQ team have plenty to handle with U.S. markets, but they also run European operations almost as large in what they call NASDAQ Nordic, which became part of the group in 2008. We accompanied Friedman on a trip to their European headquarters in Stockholm.
Well, Stockholm is one of the great markets that we own and operate here in the Nordics, but it also is the headquarters to our market technology business, where we serve 130 markets with our technology that helps them power all the markets, those markets around the world as well.
How much of NASDAQ's overall operation is represented in Stockholm?
Well, we have about 800 employees here in Stockholm, slightly smaller than New York, where we have about 1,000 employees in our New York office. So it kind of gives you a sense that this really is our second headquarters in the world. It's one of the special places that I get the benefit of being able to come to as we engage with the markets here in Sweden. One of the things that I find interesting is how similar it is here in Sweden versus New York. So the markets in Sweden have a lot of characteristics to the markets in the US, which is different than the rest of Europe. So when we look at it, we look at, well, how liquid are the markets? How many new companies come and list here in any given year? How active are the markets in terms of having retail ownership of equities? And in many, many cases, those are very similar to the US. So we have 1,200 companies that are listed in the Nordics. And in any given year, we'll have dozens of companies list here, both small companies on our SME market, which is called First North, and on the main market. So we're really, really proud of the fact that the markets here are very vibrant and have a lot of similarities to what we see in the US, but sitting here in Europe.
One sign of its strong capital markets is Sweden's IPO pace. Between 2013 and 2024, there were more IPOs in Sweden than in Italy, France, or Germany, second in Europe only to the UK.
The U.S. markets are the largest, deepest, most liquid markets in the world. But when you look at that, how that's translated into the markets here in the Nordics, it actually has a lot of commonalities. The market cap of the listed companies here in the Nordics are about $2 trillion versus, of course, we have about $30 trillion in the United States just on NASDAQ. However, the liquidity that underpins that market cap here in the Nordics is quite vibrant, very active.
We have lots of IPOs in Sweden. We have more IPOs than many European countries together. And I would say that is one important source.
Sweden's vibrant IPO market is no accident. It results in part from government policies that encourage household participation in the markets, starting with taxes. Niklas Wiklund is Sweden's Minister for Financial Markets.
First of all, for the smallest entrepreneurs and new entrepreneurs, closely held corporations, as they are called, they have strong tax incentives because there's a 20% tax on dividends within a rate of return allowed. It's quite complicated, but it's also quite strong incentives to do business. And then we have the ISK system that takes down the cost of capital, so to say, or it provides at least more capital into the system because you have a low effective taxation on your invested savings. So I would say those are two important aspects, one for the entrepreneurs and one for the providers of capital. We have strong incentives to stay in business for a long period of time. We don't have any inheritance tax, we don't have gift tax, we don't have tax on accumulated wealth, or wealth tax, as you normally say. So I would say there's strong incentives to provide capital in the system. There are strong incentives to do something good with it, and it's strong incentives for active owners to remain active and perhaps to involve their families and keep their businesses over generations.
Another big driver of retail participation is an investment account known as an ISK, a government program under which 2.5% of every employee's wages are put into an account in their name, which they can allocate among a range of funds. These funds are not subject to capital gains tax. Instead, they are taxed 1% each year on the value in the account.
One of the great examples of where regulation has played a really key role in driving liquidity in the markets has been that ISK program, where they started in 2012 and they said every citizen should be investing in the markets. So therefore they said, okay, well, we'll create a tax account where you're only taxed about 1% of your total assets every year, no cap gains tax. So it means that investors can really bring their money into the markets. Their only obligation is to invest in the public markets anywhere. And it allows investors to have a great engagement with the economy.
Christian Cederholm is the CEO of Investor AB, a company which serves as the investment arm of the Wallenberg family, one of the most prominent families in the country. In the 1970s, Wallenberg family businesses employed 40% of Sweden's industrial workforce and accounted for 40% of the total worth of the Stockholm stock market.
This has created this sort of positive flywheel effect where owning stocks in a company, you may even work for that same company, by the way, and we're blessed to have a great number of, even just going in looking in Sweden, great number of high-quality companies. So you may work for them, you may be invested in them, and of course that creates this engagement around business as part of a society.
You mentioned the breadth of ownership of equities in Sweden. As I understand it, there are 10 million people, roughly, in Sweden. You have 650,000 shareholders yourself at Investor AB. How do you explain that breadth? How does that happen?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're really thankful for the trust that people put in our work, and you know, that they appreciate what we're doing. So we're quite humble to that. The way I look at Investor, what you get is you get engaged ownership and active investment in a portfolio of about 25 really good companies, so high quality companies, and at a relatively slim cost as well. And then, of course, over time, it helps that we have created a strong total shareholder return over most sort of longer time periods at least. So something seems to be working with the model.
And I think it serves two purposes. First of all, it's about social coherence. You have your job, you have your salary, but you also have a share of the most productive part of the economy that belongs to you because of your savings. And it's about then, of course, economic efficiency. It provides capital for inventors and entrepreneurs. So it's, I would say, both about social coherence and economic efficiency in a very nice combination. Our social security system is important. It makes it possible to take risk, both with your savings, of course, but also in your work life as a whole. When you have some basic, trustworthy welfare system, you know that you can have a bit more risk, of course, in the rest of the economy. So I think that is one important topic. But of course, also the culture doesn't come from one source. The welfare system could be one such source. The education system could be another. And also, of course, that we provide financial stability, that we safeguard our financial system.
What does all this mean for Sweden's economy as a whole? Its GDP is projected to grow 2.3% in 2025 compared to just 1.7% for the United States. Perhaps as important is Sweden's level of productivity, which drives future growth.
Recent years we have had the same problem as most of the Western world, or especially the Europe as large. We have a productivity problem, but if you extend the time period a bit, you can see that Sweden is exceptionally productive.
Sweden's approach to encouraging broad and deep capital markets comes in sharp contrast to some of the rest of Europe. In his report on European competitiveness, former ECB President Mario Draghi pointed to the lack of sufficient capital support as one reason why Europe has lagged behind the United States in the growth of tech giants. Henry McVeigh is the head of the Global Macro and Asset Allocation Team at KKR, and we spoke to him after he returned from a trip to Europe.
When you look at it as a percentage of GDP, it's about a third of the U.S. And so there's clearly been a differential over the last 10 and 20 years. That's on the equity side. On the credit side, what I think Europe has missed is it's really been so bank controlled that you've missed the real growth in the securitization market. So if you think about the U.S., we securitize everything. It goes into the capital markets.
The Draghi report talked about that. Will that shift capital markets, do you think, in Europe?
Well, it's certainly been a big wake-up call, first of all. And if I take my positive hat on, what I say is that hopefully now what you can read in the Draghi report, etc., is turned into real and concrete actions as well, so that Europe can leverage all the advantages it has. I mean, it's a large market, stable institutions, whatnot, so and high equity participation in some parts of Europe as well. And then whether it shifts, I mean, it seems to, just looking at where valuations have gone recently, some of the shift you describe seem to be in the making. Where that goes long term, probably others are better positioned to tell, right?
If capital markets are key to innovation in tech, what has the Swedish approach to retail equity investing meant for its startup record? That's where we turn next, after a short break for coffee and fika, the pastry that Swedes enjoy during their workday afternoons.
We're in Sweden, so we have to be having coffee.
We have to have fika.
Sure.
So, well, fika means cake. So you get,
it does?
Yes, fika is cake with coffee.
Oh, I see.
So yes, exactly. So we're going to have a fika later
And this
today.
is a tradition, right?
It is. Actually, every Wednesday, normally, we have a fika celebration where we just get everyone together. So the whole purpose is not to talk about work, is to talk about each other and to create that sense of community. So I love it, but it's a huge tradition here, and now we do it everywhere. Don't toast in Sweden. Do you want to learn how to toast? Well, you toast, you say skål, but you don't clink.
You don't clink. Oh, that's
you look
good.
at each other in the eye, you drink, and you look at each other again. It's an old Viking tradition. Like the idea was that if I'd poisoned you, I wouldn't be able to look you in the eye.
We'll have to see over the next 3, 6, 9 months how the tariff discussions play out and what does it mean.
I do factor in some effects of tariffs now on inflation, on prices.
I like the idea of the 10% tariff across the board.
I've spent my entire career focused on fiscal discipline. I don't think these people have the foggiest notion what they're doing. And I think DOGE is doing tremendous damage to government.
Elon Musk is probably the inventor of our age, but who understands that we're in the midst of the most profound convergence among technologies.
When we are facing a once-in-a-generation technological disruption,
we cannot close this retirement gap without private-public partnership. We have to have good policy.
Do you think, Dawn, that the market is correct to be, as of now, pricing in 3 rate cuts in 2025?
I would take the other side of that bet.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are basically deep in the European earnings season.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
It's the countdown to the market open as we bring you the first trades across Europe.
We'll debate the most important stories and what will drive the big investment decisions throughout the morning. I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Kriti Gupta.
And I'm Anna Edwards. Join us every weekday morning for the opening trade, live at 7 a.m. here in London.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
The Draghi report on the future of European competitiveness called for Europe to develop a deeper pool of angel investors and increase European IPOs to fund high-growth companies. So has Sweden's commitment to these sources of capital resulted in a more robust startup culture? Sweden has produced more tech unicorns per capita than any other country in Europe after Estonia. And according to the World Intellectual Property Organization, Sweden ranks second in global innovation among 51 high-income countries, second to Switzerland, and just ahead of the United States.
Sweden has some well-known brands going to like IKEA, H&M, Ericsson, or more recently Spotify and Klarna. So it's a strong culture of entrepreneurship which has fostered, in a way, innovation, of course, but also investments in the community at large and sort of from a capital market perspective. So in Stockholm in particular, I think it's a small city, but investors are never far away.
Ali Lundin is the CEO and one of the co-founders of Froda, a tech startup that provides small and medium-sized enterprises with access to financing.
We started the company back in 2015. We came across the idea when we were sitting at Stockholm School of Economics, have an incubator called Stockholm School of Economics Business Lab. And we realized at the point in time that all these entrepreneurs who were sitting at that incubator starting their businesses were struggling to get access to external financing. And we realized that this is a huge problem and it's really hampering innovation and growth and competitiveness all across Europe.
Even Sweden's retail banks work to bring their customers into the world of investing.
One of our things to do is to help people to educate them in financial literacy. So that means that in the old days, the savings banks gave like a few kronor to when you were newborn and you could save it. And what we do is we talk with youngsters, we educate them on financial literacy, we give them easy ways to invest in equities, to put their money into pensions and things like that. So we help people through that journey to make sure that in the end they have good financial health.
Jens Henriksson is the CEO of Swedbank, one of the largest Nordic banks, with around 75% of its revenue coming from Sweden.
We're a nation of engineers and we're a small and open economy, and sometimes people ask, are you not afraid that the new technology will sort of make you lose your job? And people say, no, we're afraid of the old technology because the old technology might hurt, might sort of make us weaker. We need new technology, develop, going forward, increase growth and make Sweden welfare and a better society to live in.
Sweden's support for innovation goes back decades.
I remember back in the early or mid-90s, there was an initiative called Bring a Computer into Every Home, which was launched by the government and essentially meant that each and every household in Sweden could get a computer for almost no money at all. I think what we don't have to the same extent as, for instance, the US, you have the pockets of Silicon Valley, those huge funds that can invest billions and billions of dollars. We don't have that. So I think what that means is Swedish tech companies and startups need to show profits earlier in their journey compared to their US counterparts. Also, it's kind of a small market. You need to demonstrate scalability. You need to be able to show that this is an idea that's not only sustainable in this tiny sort of Nordic market, but this is an idea that you can actually export across the globe. So there's a requirement that you need to be able to show how this works across the globe, or at least in a lot larger market, not only Sweden.
Sweden's innovation ecosystem is supported by more than its tech or tax and savings policies. Today, the country's social welfare policies also have expanded to support the risk-taking needed to foster entrepreneurship.
It is a very vibrant innovation ecosystem. I think that the government has done a lot of work intentionally to make sure that they allow companies to take risk, allow companies to grow and expand, become global players. And then they have a great system that also encourages citizens to invest in these innovators.
Our social security system is important. It makes it possible to take risk, both with your savings, of course, but also in your work life as a whole. When you have some basic trustworthy welfare system, you know that you can have a bit more risk, of course, in the rest of the economy. So I think that is one important topic. But of course also the culture doesn't come from one source. The welfare system could be one such source, the education system could be another. And also, of course, that we provide financial stability, that we safeguard our financial system, make it in the long term high-functioning, well-functioning.
We don't do a lot of startup investment ourselves, but if I look at innovation more broadly, then I think one part of that is maybe our small home market, right? Meaning that we've always been forced to go out there and compete with the best in a way. So that's one big driver. Then I also think that we have some more societal infrastructure that works for us. Just to mention a few, I mean, one is free and generally high quality education for all, which is broadly available. We also have pretty generous welfare systems, including childcare.
Ja, det heter en bullseye på Tyskland her, og jeg lurer på om ikke jeg var på all time high. Skal vi se.
Access to capital through private markets is an important part
Å,
of the
det var det,
innovation
gitt.
puzzle.
Europe actually has about the same number of venture capital companies per year that gets hatched, which is interesting relative to the U.S. What Europe has been missing is those global dominant firms, $100 billion and more. Typically, those companies are actually getting bought by U.S. firms. So there is the beginning of the food chain on innovation, right? Entrepreneur is actually a French term. But what's happening is you haven't made it to create a global dominant giant. You have ASML, but you don't have the type of companies that you have with Google, Meta, and Microsoft. And so that, to me, is the opportunity set, is to really see that value chain all the way through. You haven't had the same opportunity set. In the U.S., it's maybe 25% of the index, and in Europe, it's 7%. So there is entrepreneurs,
Vet du hva de måtte løse inn på?
but a lot in the public market.
Hva de måtte løse inn på?
In the U.S. markets.
Investor AB is one of the most important sources of private capital for Swedish companies, but its take on private equity looks different from the United States.
Basically, when we make an investment, we do it not having exit as part of the strategy. And that means that we're really picky about getting companies who are in industries or end markets or niches where you have some kind of structural growth tailwind. We don't love to sort of fight gravity, so we prefer the tailwind. And then companies with a long-term right to win in those markets. And typically, and it goes back to the point about innovation, if we look at our companies across, I mean, call it 25 or so companies, most of them have leading market positions, and they have that thanks to leading or sort of best-in-class products, products and the customers. So that's I think we're really picky on that, the long-term attractiveness of both the company but also the industry that they're in, because we're wary that it's better basically with some tailwind and some headwind. To be clear, we have shareholders in all parts of the world. We have Nordic roots, but we see ourselves as global investors. I mean, if you look at our companies, they typically have the Nordic roots and the Nordic heritage, but coming back to our small home market, etc., they're typically active across the globe. If I look at Investor AB and the company as such, we have operations here in Stockholm and in New York. So those are our...
Ja, men nå er det bare å ta kveld hvis det ser ut som det blir tørke.
New logos, if you want.
Sweden's model has worked to demonstrate its innovation and growth, but replicating it in other parts of the EU is not as easy as it sounds.
There is a huge interest from the European Union about the Swedish case. How did we succeed to have our households to have this large retail participation in the financial markets? How did we succeed in reforming our pension system? How did we succeed in getting those tax incentivized saving products in place that provides the households with a better return than they would have in just a system where you pay taxes and get benefits from the government? And then, of course, also provides corporations with more capital than in other countries. So there is a huge interest in the Swedish example. And since we're humble people, of course, we always say that, well, it's a matter of several factors. It's not one thing you could do here.
If Europe manages to adopt the Swedish model of supporting capitalism with social welfare, the growth upside of the EU is high. But Sweden is setting its sights even higher.
We say that the United States needs to watch out if we manage for the whole of Europe to do this, because then we will be a much more efficient competitor.
And that means that you have free education, you have free universities, you have daycare, childcare, and you can continue with all these things. And then people can take a bit more financial risk. You're right, it is risk in that sense. But we know that risk usually pays off in the long run. Well, At least history has shown us that.
Coming up, we talk with the new Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, about the transformation plan he presented to Congress last week and how it would address some of the issues at the Pentagon we reported on last fall.
Som det var noe bare da.
From our studios in New York and San Francisco, our expert hosts have the data and analysis from the companies you know and the startups to watch, plus the interviews you don't want to miss. Watch Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow on Bloomberg Technology, the only daily business show dedicated to tech, right in the middle of the trading action. Live every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at the Forbidden City in Beijing, and this is Bloomberg.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders.
What's the hardest part of being a CFO?
It's hard to come up with that.
It's the vast responsibilities, the need to be engaged in different topics.
It's remembering which audience I'm speaking to and what I can say in that context.
The job is not just being the executive of the finance function, it's being an executive for the company.
I would say it's prioritization.
Complete the sentence. The hardest part of being the CFO is
telling people no. It's hard. It's the right thing to do, but it's always hard.
So being just like a touch of a heartbreaker, basically.
Yeah.
We have a plethora of good opportunities. Some are really, really good, but as we strive for the great ones, sometimes those really, really good ones have to be left behind.
New episodes this spring, only on Bloomberg.
Our global headquarters in New York, I'm Danny Berger. Welcome to Bloomberg Brief. Let's set your agenda.
Bloomberg Brief delivers the market news, data, and analysis you need live every weekday, only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
This is an update of a story we reported on last November about getting our money's worth in our national defense spending. Last week, the new Secretary of the Army presented to Congress his plan to transform the largest branch of the U.S. military.
The system is broken, but nobody felt like they had the power to change it.
Dan Driscoll is the Secretary of the Army serving in Trump's current administration, which plans to redirect 8% or $50 billion of non-lethal Defense Department spending to innovative weaponry.
With President Trump's leadership and his kind of incredibly high risk tolerance, we were empowered and given the top cover to basically go fix the things that are broken. And so fundamentally what Army Transformation Initiative, what we call ATI, is it does four things. So the first bucket of things that it does is it looks at our obsolete equipment and processes and the things that have led to bad outcomes, and we stop buying those things. And so some examples of that are Humvees. We have Gray Eagles, which are big, large drones that have been around for decades, and they just don't fit on the modern battlefield. And a robotic combat vehicle, an RCV, it's an exquisite $3 million piece of equipment that can be taken out by an $800 drone. The math just doesn't work. Bucket two is what has led to the types of contracts that have gotten us into these outcomes that we don't want. So in some instances, we have given away our right to repair our own equipment. We would see this exquisite equipment sitting on the sidelines for 8 or 12 months at a time, and our soldiers could 3D print the $2 to $20 part to get it back in the game. Bucket 3 is essentially taking the savings from cutting the obsolete equipment and recycling it to the things we know we need. Modern warfare is going to be a mixture of autonomous vehicles and drones and data. It's buying all of that equipment and really just giving us a command and control layer for the modern battlefield. And then bucket 4 is the bloat. We have just too many people up in our leadership. And so we're going to do things like cut 1,000 people from the Pentagon. We're going to push those soldiers that are stuck up here pushing paperwork around. We're going to get them back in helmets, get them back in formations to do the jobs that they actually signed up wanting to do.
Those who know have been calling for changes like these for a long time. Former U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense John Hamre says the Pentagon's failure to adapt compromises its ability to fight.
We are not well organized for sustained long-term conflict. It would really be a strain for us to manage a 3-year war. We tend to buy too few weapons for long-term warfare. Our industrial base is sluggish. It's not that the companies aren't willing to produce, but the government isn't willing to give them resources for surge capacity. We could fight a terrific short-term war, but if we had a prolonged war, it would be a challenge.
I think there are two problems. One is that we're not spending enough, and two is that we're not spending wisely enough.
Amy Ziegart is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution.
Our overall defense budget has a yawning gap with the capabilities that this nation needs to advance national interests. At the same time, we need to be spending money on low-cost, high-tech, affordable, unmanned systems and other capabilities. There's been a lot of discussion about doing that in the Pentagon, a lot of discussion about doing that in Congress, but those kinds of systems are still rounding dust in the Pentagon budget compared to where we need to be. This is the most dangerous and the most complicated threat landscape the United States has faced since 1945. We have great power competition with China and Russia, and then there's Iran and North Korea. And we also have non-state actors. Terrorist threat levels are increasing again, and they're enabled by new technologies, which are spreading rapidly. It's a very demanding landscape. The United States Defense Department is having to do more, and our budgets have not kept pace with the threat landscape. So as a percentage of GDP, the U.S. government is spending half as much today on defense as we did in the 1980s. We're spending 1/20th as much on defense as we did in the Korean War. So the needs are growing, the funding is declining.
If you look at the Pentagon for the last 30 or 40 years, you've had this very inefficient bureaucratic system that has calcified, and we like to talk about it as kind of like a pretzel for decision-making contorting in on itself.
We've done things inside the Defense Department for many years, but this revolution that's taking place in digital technology is in the private sector.
I'm taking a look at some of the industry outlook,
and we don't know how to bring that
across
in.
Geographies right now. Two areas really stick out. And it's South America. They're anticipating that that is essentially going to be flat in their unit sales, and then also flat unit sales in Asia. What do you take away from that, knowing how much they want to invest further into their relationships and their pipeline in South America? I believe they have their Investor Day in Brazil coming forward in June. And then additionally in Asia, where, as of right now, in the middle of a geopolitical tension-filled moment and environment, is there a headwind to selling U.S.-born equipment into that region and some of the mindshare sentiment?
Yeah, sure. In South America, especially in Brazil, you pretty much have to make the machine in the same place in which you sell it. So in Brazil, Deere has a full manufacturing footprint there, and they sell mostly within South America. It's the most rapid growing area of the world as far as crop acreage for corn, for soybeans, etc. They're even adding in an additional season per year if they can of additional crops. So it's important that Deere grow there. As I mentioned, some of the uncertainties from a tariff perspective between the U.S. and China, two major growers and buyers of the crop. The third place is Brazil, and they very well may end up being a medium to long-term winner here. As far as Asia goes, they like to oftentimes go by the strong brand name. There's not a stronger brand name in ag than Deere. And so I'm not surprised to see that, Deere's trying to consolidate market share and grow in these faster growing areas.
What's going to happen to this stock the next time the president makes it a talking point? Obviously, it came up a lot on the campaign trail. How concerned are you about that happening again and the volatility that may cause in the price action?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be interesting. When you look back, what's happened in the past when you had tariffs back in 2017, 2018, farmers got supported by the USDA in the end. There were some special payments made to help support net incomes, mostly to kind of shore up balance sheets. They probably won't be used to go down to the store and buy your latest tractor, but it does help farmers. It seems like the government, both parties have a strong interest in keeping farming viable, thriving here in the U.S. It's a little bit about differences in the policy as to how they get there, but it does seem like there's pretty strong support. And if things get truly bad, there could be additional support payments.
Checking on the shares of Oklo today, soaring 19% after reporting first quarter results. The nuclear technology company, not yet profitable, but it does expect to report for its first revenues in early to mid 2026. The company also announced that it finished drilling to gather information about the proposed location of its first nuclear plant, calling it a pivotal step. Joining us now is Vikram Bagri, Citi Alternative and Renewable Energy analyst. So, Vikram, Oklo, a maker, or I guess it will be a maker, of small modular reactors, which is sort of a newer style of nuclear reactors. None of them exist in the U.S. yet. So, I'm always curious how people are thinking about an investment like this, which is still relatively early stage.
Sure. I think Oklo has a differentiated strategy and a differentiated technology, which has evidence or proof of concept in form of, reactors who have operated for a very long time, one FFTF reactor and one experimental breeder reactor at Ohio National Laboratory. So they don't need a demonstration of the technology. They have enough capital on the balance sheet, $260 million, to execute their strategy, get to the installation of first reactor. So they are owners of their own destiny in a way. Their differentiated strategy also consists of they don't depend on other companies to adopt the technology and spend the capital and build the reactor. Oklo will build the reactor on their own and will sell the electricity through long-term PPAs, which they have a strong pipeline of. So all they need to execute on this strategy at this point is approval from the NRC to proceed with their plans. And until they get the approval, or they are going through the process of getting the approval from the regulators to build these reactors, they can actually complete 70 to 80% of the construction of the reactor, beforehand, during the process of this approval. The way to look at it, I would say, is that there is no dearth of demand for these reactors, given the, sort of the energy needs in the United States driven by data center and AI. Citi is forecasting data center AI and IT needs will grow by 110 gigawatts by the end of 2030. You have limited supply or limited capacity that gas turbines can add. Gas turbine capacity is sold out through the end of the decade. You have solar and wind somewhat restricted by how quickly you can add that capacity to the grid or grid constraints. And nuclear seems to be the way. It is also one of the only, I would say, renewable, subsector that has very strong support on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat. Which I sort of joke about that. Republicans and Democrats, if there is only one thing in the world they agree on, is nuclear. Even if you sort of ask the color of the sky, they probably might not agree. One will say blue, one will say red. So it's a very, very strong support. Proven technology, enough capital on the balance sheet, and owners of their own destinies, what differentiates them. Finally, the way we look at it, I'll make a 30-second point, is every reactor they install, we calculate the value of their 50-megawatt reactor to be about $1.50 per share to $2 per share, about $1.75 per share of NPV of every reactor that they install going forward.
Thank you for watching. You can stay tuned with Yahoo Finance for more earnings coverage and expert insights to help you make more informed financial decisions.
Are you ready to master the markets and, dare I say, become a better leader in the process? Well, Yahoo Finance has you covered with our new full suite of original podcast content. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're just starting your financial journey, we offer invaluable market insights and strategies to help boost your portfolio, build your wealth, and make you a successful investor. Podcast that will make you a smarter investor.
Welcome to Stocks in Translation. I'm your host, Jared Blickery. Welcome to Financial Freestyle.
Hi, I'm Bob Powell, and welcome to Decoding Retirement. Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
Welcome to Trader Talk.
I'm Elizabeth Gore. Welcome to The Big Idea.
Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report.
Welcome to Word Money. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons.
From Wall Street to Main Street to the C-Suite, we are your daily lifeline, because behind every great investor is Yahoo Finance. Join us on yahoofinance.com, the Yahoo Finance app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Elizabeth Gore. Welcome to The Big Idea from Yahoo Finance, the show that navigates the world of small business and entrepreneurship. All businesses start with one light bulb moment. And each week, I'm going to take you on a journey with America's entrepreneurs. As the co-founder of the small business funding platform, Hello Alice, it has always been my mission to ensure that entrepreneurs have the tools they need to live.
Altså, morsommere å stoppe på 21,295 der. Nedover nå. Den nedgraderingen vi snakker om her nå, skal jeg si, er det noe som kommer fra flere hold, ikke det? Det kunne muligvis. Ja, ok. Ja, ja. Det var det jeg mente, at det var flere. Det ble bra på streken, gitt. Skal vi sånn, da. Ja. Det er bom etter den spiken vi hadde. Ja. Ja. Så på
Live the American dream. So, Aboya.
Dagsen, den har jo truffet akkurat teknisk, og samme med bitcoin der la jeg ut et chart på kryptosida. Der var fullstendig treff på.
So Rich Eisen will still own the show and retain editorial control, similar to the 5-year, $85 million licensing deal ESPN signed for the Pat McAfee show. And while the Rich Eisen show is anticipated to air in its typical noon to 3 p.m. Eastern time slot, the same time slot as the Pat McAfee show, Eisen's show will be a streaming-only complement to McAfee. That means the show will not air on ESPN's linear networks and will only be available on the new ESPN streaming service, ESPN Plus, and Disney Plus too. Bringing the Rich Eisen show onto ESPN's streaming platform is another sign that the network is banking on big-name talent to drive subscriptions to its new DTC streaming service. Keeping Eisen as a streaming-only talent will help ESPN push new subscribers to its streaming offerings while also upholding the value of its cable bundle for pay TV subscribers. Let's finish out with a surprising NBA announcement from NBC. Last Monday, NBC announced that basketball legend Michael Jordan is joining the network as a, quote, special contributor to its NBA coverage starting this fall. This will be the first major media partnership for Jordan since he retired from the NBA in 2003. However, Jordan was unable to cover the NBA for the past 20-plus years.
Hører ikke Botox på Twitch.
With the Washington Wizards. And of course, his ownership
Hører ikke Botox på Twitch.
sold the Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnall in 2023 at a $3 billion valuation, while also retaining a limited stake in the team. Now, while it's currently unclear what exactly his special contributor title will look like, a person familiar with the deal told CNBC that Jordan will, quote, not be a regular in the lineup, but will appear throughout the season, end quote. And it's not like Jordan needs the money. According to Sportico, Jordan has earned $4.15 billion in inflation-adjusted earnings throughout his athletic and business career. However, given that NBC has canceled multiple scripted shows over the past 3 years, the network is clearly making the NBA the focal point of its TV programming starting this fall. And now, NBC is calling on the greatest basketball player of all time to help support its 11-year, $27 billion broadcast deal with the NBA. This week for the Deeper Dive, where I give you a play-by-play analysis of news in the sports world and its significance to your bottom line, we're talking about the upcoming WNBA season. The WNBA season tipped off yesterday, and it will be a pivotal year for the business of the W, which saw records for TV ratings and attendance in 2024. The league will also see a new rookie sensation debut in former UConn superstar Paige Beckers, and a new expansion team in the Golden State Valkyries, which became the first WNBA team ever to sell 10,000 season tickets. But of course, all eyes are on the sophomore season of Caitlin Clark, who has already become the face of the WNBA. The 2024 WNBA Rookie of the Year was a massive boon for the league and its growth. Last season, the WNBA averaged 657,000 viewers during the regular season, a 30% increase from 2023. But what's even crazier is that Clark's Indiana Fever games averaged 1.19 million viewers compared to the 394,000 average viewers for every other WNBA game last year, a 200% difference. And the WNBA clearly noticed Clark's viewership draw, as 41 of the Indiana Fever's 44 games this year will be nationally televised or streamed, including the Fever's opening night game against Angel Reese in the Chicago Sky that airs at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC today. Now, the WNBA was able to capitalize on the momentum, its league-wide boon, and Clark's superstardom by signing an 11-year, $2.2 billion media rights deal with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC that starts with the 2026 season. The $200 million annual deal is worth 6 times more than the WNBA's current broadcast deal with ESPN, and the league can earn even more media rights revenue from additional deals with other TV partners. However, while the WNBA is surely happy with its new deals, its media rights money will be a point of discussion for its upcoming labor negotiations with its Players Association. As we've discussed on this show before, the WNBA's Players Association opted out of its current collective bargaining agreement with the WNBA this past October to negotiate a new CBA for the 2026 season and beyond. WNBA players have made it clear that they desire higher salaries, a softer salary cap, a higher share of revenue, and expanded player benefits from the league. But this will surely be a tough negotiation. The WNBA, while seeing massive growth, is still struggling financially. According to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, the WNBA has lost an average of over $10 million per year since its founding in 1996. And the Washington Post reported that the league lost over $40 million last year alone. However, WNBA players are ready to capitalize on the league's economic boom, and Executive Director Terry Carmichael Jackson hasn't ruled out the possibility of a lockout if a new deal can't be reached in time. So, as you enjoyed this WNBA season, keep October 31st circled on your calendar, as a new CBA must be signed by Halloween to prevent a work stoppage. But whether a new deal is in place by then or not, one thing is clear: a new era for the WNBA is beginning, and the league's business will never look the same. We've made it to the one-on-one, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. This week, we're talking to Rich Kleiman, the co-founder and CEO of Boardroom and 35V. Rich, thank you so much for joining me. The first thing I want to talk about today is that Boardroom recently announced a partnership with Yahoo Sports. Can you just explain to us a little bit about what that is and what you guys are going to be doing together?
Yeah, I mean, I think as part of our growth strategy, it's about finding aligned partners and creating mutually beneficial partnerships. And this checks that box in every way. So the idea for us is to create a destination on Yahoo Sports where all of our content will live. And then the flagship kind of product out of this partnership will be a new show that I will create called Network, that we'll do in partnership with Yahoo. And we're excited about this. Obviously, Yahoo brings incredible reach. For us, I think we bring a different level of access and a different level of conversation to the platform. And, you know, from our early conversations with Ryan, we saw the future of partnership kind of growing and catapulting each other as like part of the natural trajectory.
Yeah, and Boardroom has obviously been around for a number of years now, and it's had tremendous growth. I mean, I remember having conversations with you several years ago, and it felt like you guys were doing a lot of different things, and it feels now like you've really honed in on your expertise. And so I'd love to just hear more about where you think sports media is in general, but also how Boardroom has sort of evolved as a media company since its founding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of learning along the way. What we did feel very strongly about was that what the brand represented and the space that we wanted to storytell from was going to continue to grow. And that was that intersection of sports and business and entertainment in a place that you've been able to thrive. And, you know, and what I've been able to see is as we've grown, what we've realized is this is a very saturated landscape, media in general, but sports media. And there's so many different platforms. There's so many different influencers, so much conversation, so much optionality that the one thing I think the consumer was looking for is a little bit of a trust factor and a little bit of familiarity. So for us, it was about being consistent in building products, creating moments and events and storytelling from the perspective of Boardroom, having people understand what Boardroom was and what our brand was. And sometimes that meant small steps along the way. Sometimes that meant swinging and missing at some things. And then it was trying certain things that I did think grew the brand, but that we didn't necessarily want to repeat. So by doing all that, we were able to identify what it was that really represented the brand and then grew it from there. But I think what you see and the reason why people are connecting with our brand is that we've been very consistent. We've kept our foot on the gas. And it's always been brand first. So what you remember about everything we do is the name Boardroom. And I think that's important as you try to connect with a consumer when there's just so much out there for you to consume.
Yeah, Boardroom is such a good name. I've always thought that it just fits so perfectly. But what do you think is sort of the future when it comes to the type of media that you guys will produce, but others will as well? Is it sort of the print things you guys are doing with the magazine covers and the exclusive interviews? Is it more newsletter stuff? Is it podcast and video content that you're going to be launching with Yahoo here? Just talk me through kind of how you think the content itself will evolve over the coming years.
Yeah, I'm actually excited for that because I think it's a combination of all of it. I think now that we've identified what the brand is, it allows us internally to build new content products, to take more chances. And as long as the brand is front and center and it is rooted in what the brand is about, we can try to experiment with different content products. So we will continue our newsletter business. We will continue to do more short form video. I'll be putting out an actual print magazine in the future as well. I think that as a utility, as part of the overall brand, it has value. It won't be our core driver at business, but I think it'll be an incredible marketing tool, and I think it'll also create a different perception of what the brand is, and I'm excited about creating that product. But it really will be a great mix of all of it. I don't think there's one thing that we're necessarily known for. I think our newsletter talks to a certain audience and has a certain voice. The audio space isn't something that we've really dove into, but a lot of our video is available on an audio feed. And I'll also be looking at more long form content that will license to third parties. I think there's more stories,
Stemmer med CMC.
documentary and film that we can look to create now that the brand has been established.
Yeah, it feels like as the company's gotten bigger, you guys are really thriving
Vad sa du?
in multiple different areas, which is probably important as you continue to expand. But for anyone just joining, we're here with Rich Kleiman, the co-founder and CEO of Boardroom and 35V. Rich, you have partnered with Kevin Durant on these businesses, right? When the media side and the investing side, and it's sort of created this nice flywheel here where you guys have distribution on the media side, but you're also making a number of investments as well through 35V over the last decade, but I imagine continuing into the future as well. What is exciting to you right now on the investing side?
I love looking at consumer products that have proven concept, that are in a growth stage, that are looking to us for a bit of strategy, looking to us to utilize the platform we've built to help add value, and looking to us to kind of align appropriate talent where necessary. And then also sports and sports adjacent. I still am really excited about that category. I think, obviously we've been able to invest allocations in some professional sports teams, both emerging teams and leagues, but also more established, like in the MLS and with PSG. But I think there's a lot of cool businesses that are adjacent to sports that are exciting for us. So I would say that, the consumer space, the sports space, and also, as these sports franchises, and you did an incredible take on this, are looking at developing real estate in and around their arena and these worlds that they're creating. I think there's some great opportunities in real estate and hospitality that we'll look to, and that I think are also rooted in sport. So therefore we can see the connection for us.
All right, we've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of my conversation with Rich Kleiman.
Vi får så mye natt, men jeg tror ikke vi får så mye natt, nei, se. Ja, det kan skje på morgenen, så det ramler ganske stygt. Ja. Mhm. Så vidt jeg
Welcome
var,
back to
men
Yahoo
under
Finance
alderen så
Sports
kan jeg være
Report.
det.
I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. I'm here with Rich Kleiman, the co-founder and CEO of Boardroom and 35V. Let's talk about the NBA. Obviously, you have a lot of experience in and around the NBA over the last several decades. You've sort of seen the league transform during
Ja,
that
og
time
det skal
period.
ikke se
There's been a lot of
normalt at
chatter
eldre
about
folk
the
får
league,
kreft, at
specifically
det
it feels like
blir
over the last couple of
ubehandlet.
years. At the beginning of this year, I mean, there was a lot of people talking about the ratings and everything was
Ja.
down and everyone was saying that the league was kind of going away or fading.
Litt
But
sikkert
it
de
seems like that has sort of
behandler
turned around over the
når de
last
begynner
few
å bli
months, and
såpass
ratings
gamle,
ended the
eller.
year essentially flat, if not up a little bit year over year. And the NBA playoffs, specifically this postseason, have been tremendous. I
Spredning
mean, the
også.
ratings are great, but the games themselves have been really good as well. What is your overall feedback and just kind of 30,000-foot view on the state
Ja,
of the
det hjelper jo
NBA
ikke.
today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, I guess, because I personally feel like the NBA, is as entertaining as ever. I think they've got a crop of great new young stars, which I think could have been a concern as Steph and LeBron and KD and these guys have gotten older. But when you see Ant and Wembanyama and a lot of these young stars coming into their own, the league is in a good place from that standpoint. I think that what's happening is the consumer behavior has changed. So you hear a lot of this chatter throughout the early parts of the season. And I just think that that has a lot to do with the length of the season, the idea that as much as you try in creating these like in-season tournaments, which I do think work well, there's just not the same level of anticipation. The stakes aren't as high earlier in the season. And I think that tunes out some consumers, but also just creates chatter, right? Because you have a sport that in general, the media around the sport, not all of it, but a lot of it is very negative and divisive. And I think that hopefully with NBC and Amazon taking over, they have an opportunity to change the conversation and change the tone of the conversation. But because of that, it allows this kind of culture of debate and this culture of negative conversation at times. So you get this combination earlier in the season where the games aren't as exciting to consumers just because there's 82 games and, our society just needs this instant gratification now and needs to feel these stakes, right? Like think about the NFL and UFC. These moments are so important each and every week, and there's so few of them that the scarcity does such a good job of connecting with the consumer. So now you're talking about game 13 on the NBA season, and you can get games everywhere now. So a national TV game doesn't hold the same weight. And then you have this landscape of negative chatter around the sport to begin with. So then you start hearing more and more of it. Now, what do we talk about? We talk about ratings, or is the league in a bad place? But what you see happen once the playoffs come around is like, there is nothing like the NBA. There is nothing like these athletes and the entertainment of the NBA. You saw it at the Garden the other day. I mean, there's nothing like that. So, I think it's in an amazing place. I think that you'll always have to figure out earlier in the season how to create a bit more of excitement. But it's culturally so relevant and has such an impact around the world. It has such an influence on culture in general. Like the NBA culture influences cross-sector in so many ways that I think it's hard to necessarily see it as going down in any way. It just has to kind of be reimagined earlier in the season a bit, I think, to connect with the consumer in the same way that it does later on in the season and into the playoffs.
And the last question I have for you, I want to quickly get your thoughts on Michael Jordan joining NBC's broadcast. This was announced earlier this week, and I think it shocked a lot of people because he's sort of been on the background for the last number of years. He was obviously a team owner and in the front office of some other organizations, so he couldn't always do media, but now he's popping out. He doesn't need the money like maybe some people do it for. It seems like he maybe just wants to have a little bit of fun and get his voice out there. What is your expectation of how maybe he can change that conversation from it going from former players who are a little bit negative about the league to potentially him, who is widely known as sort of the GOAT of basketball? Do you think that has the opportunity to change that conversation a little bit?
Well, yes. And the idea of it really was mind blowing. I mean, I was so surprised to hear that. I can't even begin to imagine what role he'll take and how that will show up. But obviously, I'm tuned in, right? It's Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I think maybe I could see a world in which like he's doing interviews or conversations and with only like some of the most elite athletes, right? Like you hold Michael for the elite athletes, or just getting his take in studio on certain things would be just mind blow for the consumer. You just never heard this. Just the awe of seeing him on air, I think will have such a great impact, but it's an amazing, amazing get. I think we'll all be tuned into it. Again, like I said, it's surprising, but obviously this is Michael Jordan, right? Like the king of culture in a lot of ways. And, if he's really bought in and this is something that he wants to do, I would imagine that anything he does, he's going to be great at. And I couldn't imagine him doing something if he felt like it would be bad for him or his brand, right? He's very thoughtful in that way. So, I think this will be a must-see television. But I'm very interested to see how and what form this comes to life.
Yeah, I saw some people likening it to Tom Brady, but it feels even much higher than that, right? Because Brady had just retired. He was very visible. This is Michael Jordan. We haven't really heard from him publicly over the last couple of decades, and now he's going to be giving his opinion. So to your point, I think it's going to be must-see TV, but we'll have to see when that comes. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm a fan and I always love coming on and talking to you, bro.
The clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buzz. So let's talk about MLB Rivalry Weekend. Now, you may have noticed that MLB's schedule this weekend features the league's biggest geographical rivalries. I'm talking Mets versus Yankees, Cubs versus White Sox, Astros versus Rangers, and more. Well, that schedule was by design for Major League Baseball, as the league is holding its first ever rivalry weekend. MLB's inaugural rivalry weekend will feature 15 geographic rivalry matchups across the league this weekend. Now, I will say that some of these rivalries feel a bit forced, given their ties to each team's location and/or history. For example, the Washington Nationals and Baltimore Orioles are close in proximity for their rivalry Beltway series, yes, but the two franchises haven't had much bad blood with each other, or the type of fire seen in the crosstown series like the Yankees and Mets, or the Cubs and White Sox. The Atlanta Braves are also playing the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park this weekend, and I don't know about you, but it feels like a little bit of a stretch to call this series a rivalry, just because the Braves played in Boston from 1871 to 1952. All criticism aside, it's clear that MLB is using Rivalry Weekend as a way to drum up extra interest in its regular season games. And I will be curious to see how the TV ratings shake out from Rivalry Weekend and how MLB could react as a result. Remember, MLB's national media rights deals all expire after 2028, and the league is also seeking to add in local rights from 2/3 of its teams to create a bundled media rights package for potential bidders. With all of this inventory available, MLB can maximize its rights fees by signing a variety of broadcast packages, similar to the NBA's recent $76 billion media rights deals, or the NFL's $110 billion package. So it's feasible that MLB could create a Rivalry Weekend package as part of its new media rights deals coming in 2029. However, the viewership data has to back up the idea, so we'll see how this year's Rivalry Weekend influences MLB's media rights negotiations into the future. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Rich and for all of you for joining us. Please make sure to scan the QR code below to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insights, and catch us every Saturday wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. See you next time.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.
Are you ready to master the markets and, dare I say, become a better leader in the process? Well, Yahoo Finance has you covered with our new full suite of original podcast content. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're just starting your financial journey, we offer invaluable market insights and strategies to help boost your portfolio, build your wealth, and make you a successful investor. Podcast that will make you a smarter investor.
Welcome to Stocks in Translation. I'm your host, Jared Blickery. Welcome to Financial Freestyle.
Hi, I'm Bob Powell, and welcome to Decoding Retirement. Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
Welcome to Trader Talk.
I'm Elizabeth Core. Welcome to The Big Idea.
Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report.
Welcome to Word Money. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons.
From Wall Street to Main Street to the C-Suite, we are your daily lifeline, because behind every great investor is Yahoo Finance. Join us on yahoofinance.com, the Yahoo Finance app, or
countries in the Middle East, we're thinking that perhaps a 10% universal tariff might be where we end up. Do you think that that's something that the economies around the globe would be able to handle?
Well, it depends on each country. I mean, the problem here is that the president is making these decisions on the fly, so to speak. One day from the next, the tariff rate will be going up. If some country does something that the president doesn't like, next thing it'll go from 10% to 20%. I mean, the uncertainty is something that is not locked in here by any stretch of the imagination, from China to the Gulf states to Europe, et cetera. So he has created a world of uncertainty that is going to be directly affecting and impacting the American consumer. And in order to, in effect, harmonize this tariff structure is going to take, first of all, discipline from the